Hello and welcome everyone to CDS RADOS for the Reef release. So today we'll be talking about features and things that we want to do for the next release that is coming up, which is the Reef release. There are topics that are already there in the Etherpad. We will try to follow the order and just ensure that we are not taking too much time for any one topic so that there is fairness across them. To kick it off, I think we are going to be starting with the telemetry topics. So I guess Yarit and Laura, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Thanks, Neha.
Would you share your screen, or would you like me to do it?
If that's fine, yeah.
Sure.
Thanks. So first, just a quick announcement that I'll be giving a walkthrough on our telemetry crashes probably in a couple of weeks. So I encourage everyone to join. I put on the Etherpad a link to the public dashboards. So I'm not aware. I don't know if everyone is aware of our public dashboards. This is where we present aggregated data from our telemetry. So I encourage everyone to check it out. So yeah, let's kick it off with the list of subjects that we have.
Is everybody able to see the Etherpad that I'm trying to share?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah, this is for the general session. So we'll be looking at the one for the telemetry.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first topic that we want to cover is new metrics collection. So right now we collect data in 5 different channels. We have the basic channels where we collect general information about the deployment. We have a device channel where we collect health metrics, mostly smart metrics. And then we have a crash channel where we collect all of the crash dumps that happened in the cluster. We have an ident channel, which is a channel which is totally optional. If users want to identify themselves, we allow doing that. And in Quincy, we added the perf channel, which collects a lot of perf counters of the cluster. Recently, we had a discussion about data that is needed in order to identify rook deployments. So apparently, we do not have this data collected yet, and we started a discussion offline about it. But I just wanted to make sure if everyone, if anyone has any ideas of what else needed to be collected specifically for Rook, and generally speaking for other components as well. So I'll just say that for the Rook part, Blaine already said that we probably need to collect. They will have to add some flag that the cluster was deployed via Rook, and this way we can fetch this information and collect it in telemetry. And Radik also suggested one configuration option that might indicate it is a Rook cluster. This is on the Etherpad under the first topic. It says MS learn address from peer. Thanks, Neha. So this is not super urgent, and I don't want to take too much time from other topics, but just if anyone has any new metrics, new data that we're not collecting in telemetry that you would like to see that is being collected, please let us know. Just take into consideration that it cannot be anything that is user defined. We're not collecting any sensitive information like host names, pool names, or anything that can identify the user. So does anyone have questions or ideas?
Well, maybe in the long run, maybe it would be worth considering to introduce some kind of extra option that would be set by the deployment machinery to indicate who was responsible for deploying such a cluster. Whether it was Ceph ADM, whether it was Rook, because now MSLR ADDR from peer is far from being an implicit, from being an explicit solution. It's a very implicit one. And if we really need such an information, maybe we should, in long term, not now, in long term, should have something better.
Yeah, I think the orchestrator in use will be a useful field, right? Like orchestrator, we have Ceph ADM, Rook, or whatever the next orchestrator becomes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this we should definitely collect, and yeah, we can add it to one of our next point releases for sure. Yeah.
And I think we can also talk to the Rook community. What else? What they are exposing from the Ceph point of view, right? I mean, something we can figure out from the upstream. We can showcase this, that this is what we have in the telemetry. And in the community, there's a Rook community meeting we can present there and ask their feedback. Like if there's any other way we can, get adoption, publicize it more on the Rook community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good idea. Thanks, Vikat.
So Yarit, I will talk to them. Maybe one day we can invite you. I can talk to Travis and then you can present what is Ceph telemetry, how it works, and how it can be configured and all this. Right?
Sure. This will be great. Thanks, I appreciate it. So if no one else has ideas, we're just really short on time. I think we can move to the next topic. And please, if anyone has any ideas, please feel free to update his Etherpad or just ping us offline. Laura, do you want to go to the next topic?
Hi, everyone. So the next topic about telemetry is about collecting a data availability score and including this score in the basic channel. So a while ago, Sage authored a Trello card, which is linked under the at the top there, about collecting or tracking data availability over time. And essentially, we this information in the Ceph-S command, which provides a snapshot of availability. For instance, you might see a warning about reduced data availability if certain PGs enter unavailable states or if they've been peering for a certain amount of time. But what we are interested in doing is collecting this information over time and tracking over time. And there's telemetry can be used to do that, since we collect telemetry reports once every 24 hours. So we were thinking that would be a good tool to collect this information. And the newly added perf channel, performance channel, already collects a lot of information that's available in PG dump. So we have access to the states that certain PGs were in, and when they were last active, when they were last peering, timestamps like that. So there are several questions to answer with this information. Question one would be, how often and in what quantity has data been unavailable in the Ceph cluster? So we were thinking that one way we could answer this question is by looking at the last active timestamp on clusters PGs and tracking this over, presenting that on the telemetry public dashboards. and we have several ideas of how to do that, but that's one way we would decide data availability. And another question we're answering is how does the frequency of an individual state relate to the cluster as a whole? So in the telemetry report, we have access to the states that PGs are in, and certain states are really indicative of unavailable data, such as anything that's not active or anything that's incomplete or creating. So we would be interested in collecting data about, daily what states PGs are in, and does this indicate unavailability, tracking this over time. So the main concerns we have with doing this in telemetry is collecting this and creating or calculating an unavailability score would only happen once every 24 hours, because that's the default configuration for telemetry reports. They're sent to the dashboards once every 24 hours. So this would really provide only a snapshot of data availability, but maybe that's enough. Maybe that's would still tell us something. And the main thing is also, in addition to tracking this in telemetry, we would also want this data availability score to be available to developers on their clusters. So we would consider putting it, maybe adding it to the Ceph-S command or in some kind of existing command. But essentially, we would want developers to have access to this score. That's pretty much it. And we're still in our telemetry huddle, where there are ongoing discussions about how we will calculate this score and what data points we need to take into consideration. But if you have any comments about the frequency of which this data should be collected, or if there are any data points that we haven't considered, you're welcome to add those comments on the Etherpad, or just any questions you might have about what we're looking to collect here. That's it for that topic. I'll pause for any kind of comments before moving on to the next one. Oh, and Yarit, if you wanted to add anything too.
Yeah, you covered everything. Just yeah, that nuance about whether calculating it by a daily snapshot would be enough, or do we really need a better resolution for this data availability score?
Okay, if there aren't any questions, again, if you remember something that you've wanted to ask and we've moved past, just please write any comments you have. There's a comment section on the bottom of this Etherpad, or wherever you end up putting it on the schedule, wherever is. The last topic I'll cover is. Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
I did have a question. So,
sure.
Are you saying, when saying a snapshot, are you saying that you would only look at the data every 24 hours to calculate scores? Or are you saying we would look at it every 24 hours, and whatever the data availability happened to be then is all we would have visibility into? Because if we're going to miss every 15-minute outage, then yeah, that seems not very useful for what we're looking to understand about the clusters. And we definitely need more resolution than it was down so long that we happened to catch it.
Yeah,
but
so
I don't think there's
that's good
a need for an urgency of updates. But yeah, I don't know exactly what our options are in the manager or whatever, but this probably needs to be a push model rather than a polling model. Like noticing certain events happen, and like taking a notification from certain events happening in the cluster, and then being like, okay, something was gone for this long.
I think the model needs to change, but I think we talked in previous telemetry meetings about doing that more data collection on a continuous basis within the cluster, and then only reporting that the kind of value to telemetry on the current daily schedule. that
Yeah,
kind of cover
Yeah.
something like
those
that
kind of
seems
events. But
perfectly reasonable. Just yeah.
Yeah, the other aspect is like, the availability thing can be independent of the polling frequency of the telemetry module itself. So the telemetry module can capture something that maybe the cluster on its own has already determined. So we don't need to rely on that once, polling for PG states or something like that.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Nia, that it could be totally separated from telemetry, and telemetry can just use whatever reports that tool can provide. So yeah, that the user can use that orthogonally of telemetry. Yeah.
So we have, if we're thinking about calculating the score in the telemetry report, we don't have to do it that way. We can just have the telemetry report take whatever score has already been calculated on the cluster side, which maybe that has a more, that's been collecting it every minute or something. And the telemetry report would include that score rather than calculating it right before the report is sent. But thank you for that comment, because that was one of our questions. Would collecting something 24 hours be accurate? And so it's good to have that feedback. Are there any other questions about this topic or comments? Okay, I'll go to the next one just since we're short. So the final topic for telemetry is identifying OSD performance outliers in the manager. So there's a Trello card, which is linked here for set for Reef, which is expressing interest in collecting or identifying OSD performance outliers in the manager side. And Neha had a thought that the perf channel in telemetry is already collecting a lot of performance information about each OSD, so that would be a good idea to use that information to identify outliers. And this is a fairly new topic, so we haven't really had any discussions on what that means to identify outliers. But
yeah,
I think
this is more like, it's just a thought that now that we have all this information, we better use it for, something that we've been thinking that we would do. But yeah, this needs to be thought through and discussed in the telemetry huddle or something.
Yeah. And I just wrote down some information about what the perf channel is collecting per OSD. Like, we're collecting perf counters, histograms, mempools, and heap stats. So that might help. Those data points might help us identify outliers. And of course, more conversation needs to happen about it, but it's just an idea for Reef. And that's really all I have to say. Were there any final questions? Or I don't want to take away from the next topic, but if there are any comments, again, just add them wherever.
Cool. Thanks, Laura and Yorit. If
Thanks,
there are
everyone.
no more questions on telemetry, we can perhaps go to the next topic. I believe this was Radek.
Yep, it's about our C++ API guarantees. Actually, at the moment, we provide users of the C++ API with guarantee that it can be compiled with C++ 11, which is now 11th year old, and other parts of the project are under C++ 17. Unlikely we will move further, and this brings a question. Actually, two of them. Is providing such a guarantee a relevant thing today? And even more general question: do we really have any users of the C++ API? of the C++ RADOS API. For sure, C API is widely used, but I'm doubtful when it comes to C++. So maybe we could actually remove some of the mental burden put on us just for the sake of providing a thing that is not so widely used and necessary. That are my questions I would like to ask here.
It was my understanding that the C++ API was internal, and that sort of started with conversations we had with Jason Tilleman 3 or 4 years ago, and then we created. And I guess I have to ask: is also looking at your GitHub or your tracker issue on this? Is there a distinction between the C++ API and the API and the API that was being consumed in C++ by RBD and that we modified with Adam Emerson enhanced recently, so-called Neo-RADOS?
Well, my understanding is that we have only, as you said, my understanding is we only have internal clients. We don't need to worry about external ones. But it's just a thesis I would really love to confirm before casing the guarantee.
Well, I think there shouldn't be. I understood that there was no such guarantee, and I think it would be harmful for us to absorb it.
Actually,
I think you need to email the dev list to ask that, because
sure,
it's gonna be a different user base than shows up to a lot of these meetings.
It's similar to when we moved to C++ 11 in the first place, though. I mean, we had to ask this question at that point, and I think folks were fine with that change. And so this will be pretty smooth sailing too.
Okay, I think it doesn't make sense to discuss any more on this. I think following up on the mailing list would be a good idea, and then go ahead with it.
Well,
I guess I did. I was also curious, like, was there a specific problem that came up that I assume this was a big issue that came up?
Yes, I linked the tracker in the chat. Basically, it was in the buffer buffer header. There was a construct. There was a patch that introduced a C++ specific construct, and because of that, we violated the C++ 11 guarantee. I think it's enforced. Okay. We got one test for tautology, if I recall correctly, that tries to build an example program using C++ 11.
Got it.
Anyway, my understanding is that no objections here to strip down this guarantee, and we can move forward by basically issuing email to the dev list.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good. Cool. All right. Thanks, Radek. Moving on. Block devices with compression. Josh, do we know if the relevant person is here or?
Yeah, I think Mohit was the one who brought this up.
Okay, Mohit.
Yeah, hi Neha. Martin is going to present that. Martin is online.
Hi, yes. So I don't have any slides or anything for that. Sorry about that. This is about a patch that we propose in order to support block devices that have internal compression capability. IBM has developed and actually even sells one of these devices. It's an NVMe device, and its usage model is very similar to the VDO device that is already supported within Ceph. It provides a very large logical block space, which is backed by a smaller physical space, and provides information about the state of the physical block space via a sideband interface, which is basically some special NVMe commands. This is very similar to what the VDO device does. The VDO device is basically an inline compression module that is part of, well, can be inserted into the Linux kernel that uses a standard NVMe device or any block device as a backend. There is already support inside Ceph for that, but this support is buried inside the block driver, and it's referenced by the kernel device. What we're proposing is to encapsulate this interface between kernel device and block driver into a plugin API. And this patch basically contains this plugin system. The plugin system itself is based on the Erasure code plugin system that already exists in there. So the structure is basically identical. And it defines an interface that allows to query the physical block state of the compression device. This allows basically later on adding multiple different plugins for different hardware. So the patch for this is provided in this in my public fork. It is actually consisting out of 3 commits. Sorry about this. The last commit that you just showed is one that basically supports some additional things that we encountered when running tests with it. For example, running out of the build tree, it needed in vstart some patches, and there was one dependency required that would force basically the block device driver, which actually instantiates or references the plugin system to use the common, because the plugin system is actually pushed into the common library. But essentially, the 2 main commits of this, I will rebase this, make it nicer. Sorry.
No worries. I just decided to click on whatever I could find.
Okay. So the main 2 commits are actually one that implements the entire plugin system and wraps the VDO driver into a plugin. So basically, I took the code for the VDO support and put it into plugin so that it's basically used via that. And there's actually a second commit that I separated out, which adds the keep caps bit to the state of the OSD. We need this actually for our special plugin in order to do certain NVMe pass-through calls, IO kernel pass-through calls that require certain kernel capabilities. And when switching from root user to Ceph user, you usually lose it. But this patch basically maintains it. And for capability-aware plugins, you can basically activate the capabilities that you need. That's basically it. Sorry. Maybe if you want to see this here, I did the big mistake of pushing this morning the merge button for the upstream on my fork, which caused the last master to be merged into this patch. So you're basically on the wrong side of this merge. I have to rebase my patch to make it more clear. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. And I think this sounds exciting, and it's worth discussing at a CDM when maybe you can more formally prepare and share it with the broader group. What do you think? So CDM is essentially like once in a month session that we have a developer meeting. So maybe we can choose whichever one works for you.
Okay. Should I already create a merge request, or should I hold it off and just have the patch ready?
You can create a PR. It doesn't have to create a PR. And there's something called a draft PR these days. So if you want to put it in a draft state, that's also okay.
Okay, I will do that. That's easy, basically from my side.
Cool. Any questions? Okay, if not, we can follow up later.
Actually,
oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just want, I guess I know that there's some integration with VDO that already exists. Have you looked at how well it works for your block device? Because I never got the impression the VDO integration was really fully baked. It was sort of a technology that people wanted to put together, but VDO trades off CPU usage for lower storage utilization, and that's sort of the wrong optimization for Ceph. Having it in the device is a lot more interesting, but I'm just wondering what happens when we start running low on space.
Okay, so
Like on the actual space in the device, and it still says in the one layer that it has a bunch because it's, trying to pretend.
yeah, so again, yeah, as you said, it's actually in this case you don't trade off both CPU cycles because it's all the device that actually does inline compression, and you actually is now doing it full line rate at full bandwidth. There's no impact whatsoever. Yes, I agree. The integration does not seem complete. You get at least the feedback to the upper layers of Ceph, so you will get warning messages that your cluster is running full if it really runs out of physical space, and you can take measures at that point, similar to when your non-compressed basically runs low. But yes, the displays are not that nice because the ratios do not consider actually the compression 100%. You get basically a certain starting capacity, which is your physical capacity, and while you write much more data than the physical capacity shows, and you still have lots of available, and then the percentages are a little bit funny, but it works so far, at least for alerting us to low availability situations, so that on the higher level actions can be taken.
All right, cool. Just as long as we know what the limits are and where we'd like to improve it. Sweet.
Cool. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.
Move on to the next topic, which is QoS. I believe we've got Aishwarya and Sridhar. However, you want to drive this topic?
Yeah. So if you could just open that Etherpad, I can just walk you through stuff that is being done. Yeah.
Can you guys see it?
Yeah. Yes.
Cool.
I can see it. Yeah. So I thought I'll just give a background of the current work that has been done for the client versus client QoS. This has been in the works for quite some time in the past, and folks like Eric, Sam, and others, they have been working on this. So I basically based the current changes that I have made on the original PR that the folks had worked on, that I highlighted there, 20235. That's the one. So I based the work based on this PR and adapted it to the current implementation of the clock scheduler. So the PR that I'm working on is currently still work in progress, and I have provided a link to that as well. So there are quite a few things to work on, and I'll just present the current state and the next steps that we can take. So the current state of this is that I'll just enumerate the changes that I have made as part of this new PR. The first item that talks about service tracker. It's basically we have basically incorporated the DM clock service tracker in the objector code. The service tracker essentially tracks the response from the DM clock server, and then proceeds to calculate the request parameters like delta and rho, which is essential for the DM clock algorithm to work. So service tracker object essentially does this work for us, and based on the implementation in the original PR, I have added commits which essentially follows the same thing that what the original PR had intended. The other change is the messaging changes to allow clients to send the request parameters like delta and rho, and then also in the response path receive the QoS response like the cost and phase that the service tracker kind of uses to calculate the request parameters for the subsequent requests from the clients. The other bit that I have integrated, looking into the original PR, is the QoS profile manager. That essentially encapsulates the client QoS profile and the DM clock service tracker. So this is essentially used by the injector in the LibRaDOS layer, and it basically acts as a conduit to pass the QoS request parameters and then receive the QoS response. The other bit that I have added, which is not there in the original PR, is the client registry. This is again based on the implementation in the main DM clock code. So this the client registry essentially tracks the map of the external clients and the QoS parameters associated with those external clients, and also introduces a cleanup logic to clean up to remove stale clients from this registry. So, for example, if some client becomes silent for quite some time, it doesn't make sense for us to keep that entry long enough for so long. So the cleanup logic essentially looks at the age-based, implements the age-based cleanup mechanism and cleans up this registry periodically. And this PR also implements quite a lot of unit tests to test all the above functionality that I have mentioned. And yeah, so this is the current state of the PR. The next step is obviously to get the first set of reviews going, just to capture kind of the path that I have taken, whether it's in line with whatever folks had thought of earlier, and that feedback would be highly valuable. And then there's a bit there's some few things about the QoS profile manager that I need to relook at. So essentially, what happens now is the profile manager is implemented like a static. It's a process-wide kind of variable, and then I saw a few changes that was made by Sam to make it to make this on a per objector basis. So that's something that I'm trying to take a look at, and if that is those things I need to look at and discuss, and then proceed to make changes there. Apart from that, based on the feedback, we can get into testing with the actual LibRaDOS clients after incorporating the new APIs. So that's the ultimate goal. I was not sure about the support of other types of clients like RGW and such. So maybe that could be taken up at a later point. But right now, this PR essentially focuses on LibRaDOS clients. So that's the current state of client versus client QoS work. Open to any questions or feedback here.
So certainly that sounds very impressive, and I'm very appreciative that you're picking up the ball here and going with it, because it was a lot of work, and at some point RGW needed my attention, so I left it, and Sam pushed it forward quite a bit. But thank you for doing all of this.
Yeah, sure. A lot of interesting work. So I really hope that you guys take a look at this new PR and then give me the feedback so that I can take this forward. And yeah. If there are no other questions, we can go ahead with the next topic, which is handling high priority operations. This kind of came up on a Trello board.
Just 1 sec. Before we go into that, maybe it's worth giving like a 2-minute overview of what currently exists in Quincy and why this handle high priority ops is required. Maybe, I don't know, whoever wants to do that, maybe just give a quick summary of what exists at the moment for folks who are not aware?
You mean the current implementation in the
background
of Mplog, right? Yeah.
Background.
Oh, okay. So in Quincy, we essentially added the Mplog capability on the OSDs. So to provide QoS for operations like client ops, recovery operations, and other background operations like scrub, snap trim, and the PG deletions. So the testing for this is currently in progress on large clusters. So on a small scale, of course, we have been able to test a few of these, and the fine tuning of the profiles for the background operations, that is still in progress. I think we have pretty much narrowed down on the things that we want to make for the config profiles. But largely, it looks good for the client ops and the recovery operations, and a bit of fine tuning is necessary for the background operations. So that's where we are at currently with the changes in the OSDs. So this came up. So this came up because we saw an issue where in some cases the PGs in pre-merge state, they were stuck in backfill wait state for a long time, and there was a need was felt to handle such PGs stuck in this state at a higher priority. So essentially, the requirement is for the Mplog scheduler to also look into the priority of certain operations, a small subject maybe, and then prioritize them quicker than the other operations in its queue. So this is still in the conceptualizing stage, but some solutions that I thought of was one which involves using high queue, which has slightly a lower priority than the current immediate queue that we use in Mplog code. The immediate queue is not handled by the Mplog scheduler, but rather it's used for very high priority operations like replying to the replication ops and things like that. So we could introduce high queue where we could handle such operations by looking into the existing priority field of the ops scheduler item. That's one solution that I was thinking of. The other one was to introduce some kind of logic where after looking into the high priority field, we could manipulate the cost of such items, basically lower the cost, so that Mplog, so that once it gets put into the Mplog queue, it's able to dequeue these operations much quicker than what is currently happening. So these are the two sort of conceptual things that I had in mind, but I'm open to any feedback to tackle it in a probably different way.
Yeah, I don't think we need any other third solution. One of these should work. I think we discussed solution one, I believe, in the QoS call.
Right.
So yeah, I think either should be fine. Let's probably look at the feasibility of the code and see which one we can get to merge faster, because this kind of completes the picture of background QoS, and then we can completely focus on client versus client, which I believe is going to be the tougher nut.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Any questions? Anything else? Yeah. Somebody had a question. Aishwarya, anything you want to add here?
Nope. I think Sridhar covered it all.
All right. Cool. So if there's nothing else on this one, the other piece of QoS I wanted to just quickly mention is the Codel PR, which is actively being worked on from folks from UC Santa Cruz. And there's already been a CDM session, so I'm not going to go into too much detail into it, but we are pretty close to getting this merged. And the basic idea is admission control at the Blue Store layer. Sam, anything else you want to add to this?
Maybe I will jump in for a second.
Sure.
For some time, I was very picky about this PR. I did not want to merge it, but recently I understood that its algorithm might be a bit deficient, but still it provides a valuable infrastructure to actually improve upon the rate control algorithm. So I will quickly review this, and because it was already in a very good shape technically, from a technical point of view, long ago. So I think we'll merge it rather sooner than later.
Cool. I think, or this is Sam. I think it's pretty well isolated from the rest of Blue Store, so I think it's pretty safe to do so. And we'll want to make further improvements to it. So merging it will make it easier for people to do performance testing.
Yep, I agree. All right, for folks who are interested in further detail, in the PR itself, there's a bunch of links to the presentation and the code walkthrough, so feel free to look at that. Okay, I think that with that, all the QoS stuff is complete. Next, I just wanted to touch upon a few recovery improvements and changes I believe that we have in the pipeline. And it's worth considering them for the Reef release. Some of them are more complex, so it'd be a good idea to start thinking about them sooner rather than later. The first one is EC Clay Code. So this got introduced in Nautilus. It is a new erasure coded plugin, but it has been marked experimental since then. Last year, there was some discussion in the user email list about removing the experimental flag, and we, in the process, found out that there have been users who've been using this successfully since we released this. But I think the common concern was that it made some changes to the EC backend logic, which made us think, twice before removing the experimental flag. So in general, I think the question I want to raise is that, do we think we should just start testing it more and give it like a full cycle, not make it like anything like a default or anything, I'm not even suggesting that, but remove the experimental flag if we think that it's not breaking our tests or the additional test coverage around EC that we could add in Reef. What do people think about it?
Yeah, I think it's been there for a long time and we've seen no issues from it, so I think it makes sense to take away the experimental flag.
What does it do other than the normal plugin stuff?
Other than the normal plugin stuff, it optimizes for network bandwidth. There is
no, but I mean, you mentioned that it makes some changes to EZ backend. What does it do that's different from other plugins?
That is a very good question. So there are two PRs that went in when this got added. The follow-up PR is where there were some EC changes that were made by Sage. Those definitely need to be revisited. I don't remember off the top of my head. Josh, do you remember?
No, I think we looked at it last year at some point, but I forgot now.
That would be something to look at then.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm just trying to get consensus on is like it's worth revisiting those PRs and test the EC Clay code more for the cycle. It's no additional code change but more testing and investment into looking at what changes went in. At that time, it was mostly a project. It was like a project, an outside contribution. which we definitely welcomed and looked very promising. Yeah, Vikyat, you had something?
Yeah, so I think there was one thing we wanted to ask this in Ceph users and also to run some extensive tests, right? That in the scale also, like how the EC pools will behave with the RGW workload, especially because the larger use case of EC pools are with the RGW workload, right? So
Yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. When I'm saying in investment, those are the kind of things we'll probably want to do before. And yeah, I think I'm again suggesting removing the experimental flags if it's not breaking anything badly. I think I'm more concerned about the corruption aspect of things. So. All right, so I don't think there's much more discussion required. I think we all agree. Revisiting the EC code changes and further testing is what we need. The next one is another PR that we've discussed at a CDM, and there is a very detailed. Is Mikola on the call by any chance? Yes, Mikola, this is your PR that we held off merging for Quincy, but I think we definitely want to go ahead with it for Reef. Do you want to briefly cover what the purpose of this PR was?
Okay, I looked at it a long time ago. So the idea was currently on our recovery, we found some missing objects on primary OSD, and we restart this primary OSD. This information is lost. The idea was to persist this missing information on the secondary OSDs and yeah, the patch it's kind of worked, but when I was testing its on tautology, I found some edge cases where it still didn't work. And right now I don't remember details. Did not have a chance to work on it for a long time, but probably yes, it's a good idea to. So yeah, I still have plans to look at it and analyze the results of testing and probably to come with a better solution or fix.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's a lot of good context in the links that I added here, and your PR already has those. So that'll be good to revisit. But yeah, the general idea that you described was the same, that we make the replicas also persist the missing sets, because I remember that we had, there were some corner cases that you ran into while fixing some other problem where we were actually losing this information, and that in Nautilus it was leading to a crash or something, if I recall correctly, but all the context is in this PR. There's a bunch of discussion we had around this. But I think the important piece here that I want to focus on was the testing piece. There were concerns that we raised at that time that we do not have enough coverage around AI. Yeah, go ahead.
The testing piece was actually we wanted a backport. It was a bit different, related problem, but yeah, and we wanted it a backport for Nautilus, and due to refactoring, it was rather dangerous. Although the fix looked simple, but it was dangerous, so we decided not to do. And so, but yeah, it's. So.
Yeah, I remember that. I think the additional piece that we discussed at that CDM was that we lack enough tests that are.
Yeah. The testing is yes, it's
exactly. So this is the piece I'm talking about. So, given that we are talking about making recovery improvements, easy code backend changes and things like that, I think revisiting this is probably not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Okay, any more thoughts on this? This is mostly everybody agrees, we just need to revisit it, kind of thing. All right, if not, let's move on. There are a couple of items that I added here, again, just mostly for everybody's information, but these are PG log related improvements. There is a well-known issue that was reported around the accumulation of dupes in the PG log, which led to out-of-memory conditions. And we now have a PR that fixes this from Nitsan. Nothing much to be discussed. Everybody agrees it's a good idea. We just need to get this done. And similarly, there's another PR which is essentially going to be logging the size of the PG log entries, because in the past we've run into issues where one PG log entry for whatever reason has been huge, and it's not something like I would say is fixing a problem or anything, but it's more like developer knowledge in case it saves us the trouble of going back and dumping the PG log and all kinds of object store tool activities, which is also another PR that Nitsan from the RADOS team is working on. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight these couple of things. Any more discussion on any recovery related stuff? All right, if not.
Oh, 1 second.
Yeah.
So going back to the previous one about the missing set recovery things, that was adding a message that actually moves that data, right?
Yeah, it was the primary would send a message to the peers. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm skeptical about that. That sounds extremely complicated.
Actually, probably yes, and because when I started testing it, and so do you have a better idea?
Not immediately. I would need to review what the problem was in the first place, but I'm just going to say that any change that involves changing the message protocol or adding messages to the OSTs is a vastly higher bar testing-wise than any other solution. So if you can come up with a better way of doing that, that would be better. For instance, if you could make it less sensitive to needing to remember that in the first place. In other words, make it not a problem that it forgets the information. But if we do need to do this, then the testing requirement would be extremely high. You will spend vastly more time developing testing than you will developing the actual patch.
Okay, I will probably then write a message to devlist to CC describing the problem, because I will need also to recall what was going on there, and yeah, if you have a better idea how it's, yeah, it's highly appreciated.
In my memory of the discussion, we all agreed that the testing requirements were more than what the coding requirements were, but I would also like to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean that I agree with Sam's point of view that this adding a message would complicate things very much, because it is what I remember what I saw, that I still, after adding, I had some edge cases where it didn't work as expected on the test. Probably it was just a problem with my implementation, but still, yeah. So if we think about another solution that does not require at all to send those messages, and instead fix it differently, then yes.
Or find a way to ignore the problem, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, yes. Because yeah, it's actually it's a rather minor issue but maybe we at least we may have some improvement for.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
adding,
it's a very
adding a
edge
message.
condition, if I remember correctly, right, Mikola? It's just a
It,
restart. It's a sequence of steps that need to happen, right?
actually, it's not so edge. It's when you are doing backfill and found during backfilling that some object is missing, you enter this backfill not found state PG.
And
But when you
to be,
restart, yeah,
to
when
be
you
clear, that
restart,
condition can only happen if the PG is already corrupted.
already, yeah, and
Right.
when you restart OSD, this information is lost and it's just active in clean state. Enters. So but if you run deep scrub, it will find
Right.
this problem again. So the problem in our customer was that they didn't run even just scrub, not deep scrub. So they had this disabled and were not aware about this problem. So, but they were still very unhappy about this and wanted us to fix
So
this
we're
eventually.
basically, I'm of the opinion that we should definitely not be adding this kind of complexity for what is essentially a scrub problem. Remember,
Yeah.
this can only happen if the PG is already corrupted. Adding a message of this type adds code paths that are more likely to cause bugs than this bug in the is likely to exist in the first place. We have to maintain it going forward. Every time we touch related code, we have to make sure we don't break it. It's a big deal.
Okay. Actually,
So
probably
I think we should reevaluate this and try to find a better way of fixing it.
Yeah, agree.
Cool. All right. And just to make sure, except like the condition that you just described, Mikola, there weren't any other upsides to doing this, if I recall correctly, right? Like, is it going to be handling any other weird edge condition?
No, basically, this PR about to fix this problem that for us are also, I mean, for me, the developer does not look very critical. It's rather minor. The issue that the information about this corrupted PG is lost when the primary OSD is restarted. That is only the thing that this PR was targeted to fix. So, and this does not look like a critical issue. Just our customers were very upset about it, and yeah, and that
I
is
think
why
I'm misunderstanding. Then how do?
I'll explain it, Greg. The general version of this problem is the primary, when doing scrub, observes that one of the replicas doesn't have a copy of the data, right? With me so far?
It was
or the primary
detected.
doesn't matter.
No, well, it was detected during
backfill. I know. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm saying the general version is the one where it gets detected during scrub. That's a lot more common.
Yeah.
We don't currently write that down. We don't propagate it back to the replica or write it into the primary's missing set. So when you reset the acting set, that information gets lost until you reperform a scrub. There's a special case version of this where if backfill is operating and it expects to find an object that isn't there, because again, the PG is corrupted in the first place.
Well, sorry, that's the part that I'm confused about. Why does it have to be corrupted? Why can't it just be an old, like it was doing updated?
Because we wouldn't have looked for the object in that case. We'd already know. We already have affordances for that.
Okay.
That's the answer. We don't go looking for objects to find out whether they're there on the authoritative copies. That's only on the backfill targets. So in either of these cases, because we don't take this information we've learned and apply it to the primary's persisted missing set and the replica's persisted missing sets, we will lose it when we go through an acting set change. So if we wanted to fix this for real, we would try to tie that specific backfill case into a general scrub case that simply tries to repropagate any of these missing objects back to the missing sets they came from. And that might be a valid feature to add, but it's extremely complicated. for what
Okay, but this is only occurring if we mysteriously lost data off of a disk, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there already has to be a corrupted disk for this to happen.
Okay, got it.
So it might be worth doing, but the testing load would be really high, and it would be something we would need to specifically inject errors for in Topology, like we already do for certain scrub problems. That's my perspective anyway. Other people are free to disagree, of course.
No, I am all for reducing complexity. I still think the error injection tests and all that can still be improved, given that there are certain edge cases and things that sometimes users report and we're still not catching them enough. So
I think I'm saying in this case that it would be a prerequisite for merging the PR.
Yes, yeah, I absolutely agree.
This would be one of if it were an urgent problem, it might be worth merging a fix and then filling in the testing gap later. But this isn't urgent enough for that, and we can't afford to break it by accident. So we would need those topology tests in place with the initial merge.
Yep. Okay, I think that's enough discussion on that topic. In the interest of time, let's move on to the next topic, which is BlueStore. Igor, Adam, are you here to drive this?
Yeah, I mean, I will maybe quickly go through my points. First one is I want to make a continuation of some allocator tests that were done very long ago, and basically I didn't properly finish them then. It stems from the recent MARC tests that were being performed, that we had a performance problems difference between Quincy and Pacific that we couldn't explain. Basically, to cut it short, we found that the allocator had a deficiency in some situation. The overall problem with BlueStore allocators behavior is that we basically fix one issue at the time. When we find some problem with allocator, we do a modification. Either it's to reduce fragmentation or to improve its speed in some conditions that we actually were having problems on. My goal is to make some simple infrastructure that will on any standalone OSD, basically deployed anew, will fragment the data, put objects, basically do some simulation of a real life workload with some data points, like having testing RBD highly variable, high write random rate with OSD field to like 80 or 90%, and on such created states, then perform allocator tests. The goal is to actually make a comprehensive table of our allocators' performance in a different, almost corner case scenarios, so we could actually validate them. And the usage for this would be like, recently MARC made a very good change for AVL allocator to keep its always move its last allocation search place, even if proper place was not found, just to not repeat the same search next time. But we currently don't know how this will behave if our OSD would be severely fragmented and also very full. If it wouldn't be better to actually now pay more time to find some better placement, even though we are just breaking some requirements. Yeah, basically that's it. It's something that I would just make an infrastructure for testing our new allocators and existing also, so we could know.
Adam, I think one of the tricky things with this is that we're definitely finding that different hardware behaves differently. Not even so much just hard drives versus flash, but within the range of different flash hardware, we're seeing different behavior. So it's a tricky problem.
Yeah, okay, I might have omitted that. Such testing would be maybe an analog to RADOS bench, so it could be actually run on a deployed, maybe empty, but a deployed OSD on actual hardware, not an analytic test run on some validation hardware. But if we expect that something is fishy in some actual hardware environment, then we could use that to verify.
I think one of the things that's going to be really difficult for us is figuring out what is the cost benefit of spending time now to reduce fragmentation that will hurt us later, right? Do you really need this one IO to be guaranteed to finish fast, or is it okay for this IO to take a little longer if it reduces fragmentation on the drive? It's a hard question to. I mean, I know we can test for it. It's just a question: how do you answer it?
Yeah, Mark, I totally agree. And to actually find out that boundaries, we should have tests to push us very far to like a full filling the drives, because
Sure.
we know that for high usage drives, we sometimes are having a problems with BlueFS, and then we're having a problem with BlueFS superblock not fitting, and so on. The problems we already identified but still not solved.
Yeah. I mean, the whole reason why Kefu's PR went in last summer for the AVL allocator was because I guess we were spending excessive time in near fit, to the point where it was having a huge impact on customer clusters. So we limit it, but now by limiting that search, right, we fragment. So it's kind of tough to know, okay, how much fragmentation is acceptable and how much delay is acceptable when searching.
And
yeah.
Exactly, that's what I mean by having some higher order algorithm to actually control allocator behavior.
Sure.
For long period of allocator running, we could allow it to just spend milliseconds. But if we finally see that fragmentation is going high, then we allow it to spend time more for doing a better fit.
Adam, I don't remember. Did you comment on the PR I've got for the time-based control?
No, I did not comment. There was nothing to comment. It was just okay.
Do you think that's a? I still am of the opinion it's a better way to go than what we're doing now.
Exactly. That's okay. A better way that we have now. Still, I think we need more, but more, not instead.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Adam, just almost a side note about fragmentation. In my opinion, dealing with fragmentation or attempting to avoid fragmentation is not an exclusive task for allocator. Moreover, it's impossible to resolve it at allocator level completely. So it's user pattern, user access pattern, which determines the final fragmentation. So I think that no matter what we can introduce in allocator itself, we will still have potentially issues with fragmentation. So maybe we need some different means to fight that, something like defragmentation or whatever.
That's a good point, Igor. We should probably have some means for defragmenting these.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So just want to say that I'm not sure this fragmentation with allocator tuning or improvement makes much sense. So to some degree, yes, it definitely makes sense, but it wouldn't fix the issue completely. That's my point.
Okay, Igor, so your suggestion would be, instead of fighting very hard with fragmentation on allocator level, make it some defragment and some feature like that in the loop or out of the BlueStore or right loop?
Perhaps yes. So, well, my point is, we need some means to fight the fragmentation. Is it defragmentation or any other means? Like, yeah, probably it's defragmentation. That's the only thing which comes to my mind. But yeah, so the idea is we need something more high level than allocator to fight that.
I agree with you, Igor. I think it's probably good for us to try to optimize for fast turnaround on allocations. Maybe not ridiculously fast, given everything else that we deal with. So some don't fragment everything immediately, but yeah, for cleanup, especially of really full disks, some kind of defragmentation strategy probably is the way to go.
Yeah, because if user fragment the disk by their random chunk releases, you can do with that through allocator. It's a different task. Yeah, allocator can help to reduce the fragmentation, but the longer drive runs or storage lives, the more fragmentation will come or might come to extend. And at some point, you can just fight with that in allocator.
Okay, so my take from this would be that pushing down such endeavor will be better. Just not make excessive testing infrastructure for allocator, even if more think about recollecting, merging free space in some way, some defragmentation.
Well, it seems like you still need a way to empirically evaluate these approaches, right? That's why you were talking about testing?
That's why I'm talking about testing, but in actual spending the budget, I maybe should more focus on making defragmentation first and then trying to improve and find some corner cases for allocators. That might be more gain
Maybe, but a background defragmenter is going to require a lot of empirical evaluation. There's a lot of freedom in how you implement something like that. So I don't know, testing defragmentation behavior seems pretty important to me.
Okay, in that sense, having infrastructure that can test behavior could be a valuable input to also evaluate defragmentator. I agree. Yeah, I get that.
Okay, I think Adam, yeah, I hate to do this, but I think if we have to have a broader discussion, let's take these topics to CDM and let's finish whatever we have. We are running out of time now.
Sure.
But it's good.
So
I mean, we are getting food for thought for future CDM sessions. So go ahead.
So
Adam.
next topic, I guess it should be mentioned after Igor talks about possibly his work about custom write-ahead log for RocksDB, so I will postpone that. And the third topic is we seem to have, I mean, it's basically confirmed. In some cases, we have a situation where deferred writes done to objects, meaning instead of actually writing to drive, we only mark it in write-ahead log in RocksDB in deferred operations table. Sometimes we can, when we fail after when OSD makes a deferred writes and then fails and we restart, it is possible that we overwrite some BlueFS data. It's not mandatory, but BlueFS data is the most probable target. This is something we basically introduced when in Nautilus we dropped mechanism that we moved data blocks between BlueFS and main BlueStore device. And that changed caused us to open a window for data corruption. So it's possible that we will, after restart, corrupt some BlueFS data. There are two possible solutions, I mean, for this issue. The bad and quick one is to not execute deferred write when we detect that we will destroy active BlueFS data. Therefore, we will basically get a corrupted object. But it's better than corrupting RocksDB data, which always kills us completely. And the better solution is to modify deferred structure, deferred in message format, to include also which object and on what offset is being written. Then we could control that if we have some miscalculation, we could recover from that and realign to the new position that we should actually write the data. That's like, it's not done, it's just to half-cooked solutions to the problem. And just to put in context, such occurrence is relatively low. We could only find, actually Igor found one such occurrence in a specific erasure coded pools.
Well, but
why is this possible in the first place?
Because we keep deferred writes in database after the chunks they are targeted to are actually released, and hence on non-graceful shutdown we might want to replay these default writes again, and they get into already reallocated chunks. I mean, these chunks are already taken by BlueFS.
So have we addressed that problem?
So actually the problem is still open. So yeah, looking for best solution so far. So from one side, on one hand, we don't want to overcomplicate the deferred write processing. I mean, this detection, which deferred writes to be released if some overwrite happens to the same chunk. It's a bit tricky procedure. And on the other hand, it's probably better to implement during deploy, since it's less intrusive and we are not that limited to CPU cycles, for instance, to do that checks. So it doesn't matter much for if we need a bit more time during deferred write replay on startup rather than perform such checking on each write during regular operation. And just a couple more comments. So I managed to reproduce that using this start cluster, and I saw that at least at one cluster in the field. And also from time to time, we are getting some RocksDB corruptions with unknown root causes, so which might be caused by this issue. So I can't say it's very seldom, so but most probably we just haven't identified it properly all the time.
So you're taking sort of a two-prong approach. You're discussing a mitigation here that will be easy to backport, and then you're going to fix the actual corruption problem?
Well, I think it's a single task, so I can't see how to split it into two parts.
Oh, I guess I misunderstood the proposed changes, though. Both of those sounded like simply ways to reduce the damage when the bug happens, which doesn't seem sufficient to me.
Yeah, actually, my thinking was to make it two-way. First, make it quick mitigation as much as we can without any change, and then on a longer time think about a good solution to prevent it from happening, actually.
Because, I mean, given how bad this is, my inclination would be to disable deferred writes completely.
I'm afraid it's a very devastating change for spinners.
But on the other hand, for spinners, we might be actually willing to pay the cost for checking if we do have a deferred write waiting when we try to release object or do something like that.
Yeah,
I mean, I think you have to handle it one way or the other on any kind of disk. I mean, period, right? This is a fairly serious data corruption problem.
We don't do deferred on solid state drives by default.
And just another comment on that. This actually happens when DB uses main device. So either it's collocated with main volume or if it's split over. So it doesn't happen if you have standalone.
It's true that it won't corrupt RocksDB, but it could still overwrite another object's data, right?
Well, it's less likely, and I have a feeling that it's not happening at all, because actually it's a short gap on startup when BlueFS can allocate chunks for its maintenance purposes before the deferred rights are applied. And if it happens, then the issue might appear. But during these periods, the startup period, there are no user activities.
Bluntly,
So
any probability of this happening strikes me as extremely serious. I don't really care how rare it is.
Well, what I'm trying to say, I think it's not possible. It's not corrupting user data. I can prove that, but my current understanding is that causes corruption to, well, BlueFS only. It might cause corruption to BlueFS only. So if you use, which means that if you use standalone BlueFS volume, you are safe. Well, I'm not saying it's perfect, but just to mention. But I completely agree that we need to fix that issue. The question is how to do that in a simple and straightforward way, which wouldn't bring other issues. And yeah, again, trying to avoid this during regular operation looks not that easy, and it's relative.
So going by your theory, Igor, it sounds like there are some conditions, like it's co-located, or DB and block only on spinners is where this bug can actually show up.
Well, I'm not completely sure that we never use deferred rights for SSDs. I have another feeling that I saw that for SSDs in some cases.
I remember there's different settings.
Right,
I think it's set to 0 or something.
Right,
yeah.
But I was quite surprised when I realized that I could see that when using SSD drives only. I need to double check that, but I have a concern that it might affect all SSD configurations as well.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we should double check that and look for a minimal solution that we can provide to existing releases. That should be our focus area.
Yeah, I agree. This should be fixed as soon as possible. At least we should have some workarounds.
Okay, I think with that, maybe you want to cover the other topics you added, Igor?
Yeah, I can say that I was planning some extensive discussion on that. Just try to recap features that we might want upcoming in the next major release. And the first one is this new write-ahead log, which Adam mentioned and which I'm currently working on. The idea is to remove write-ahead log. So is to replace RocksDB write-ahead log, embedded RocksDB write-ahead log, with a standalone one residing at BlueStore level, which will allow us to parallelize access to it from multiple threads, which is not the case with RocksDB write-ahead log. Currently, we access RocksDB through a single KV-sync thread. Yeah, and probably we can also use this write-ahead log, new write-ahead log, for PG logs tasks. So instead of abusing RocksDB, we can have a more natural way to keep PG log using this write-ahead one. Since we get more control over it when we have it in BlueStore, we might get more chances to do that. I still need to think about how to ensure consistency between DB transactions and PG log updates. So just need some more time to sit and think about that. And also there are at least a couple new issues or tasks which we might want to have to fix or to implement before moving write-ahead log to production. The first, well, actually the second I mentioned here is we need to refactor our BlueStore StatFS tracking mechanism, which is currently like we update StatFS on each metadata update transaction. And similarly to Gabby's stuff, which currently avoids allocation map updates on each transaction, but provides means to recover that on startup from database, we can do the same for BlueStore StatFS in absolutely the same manner. So what Gabby doing? He enumerates all the objects and retrieves retrieves chunks which are allocated for them and builds the allocation map. This happens on non-grazing shutdown only. And the same during the same process, we can learn how many spaces allocated, how many spaces actually users is actually referenced by users, and the same for compressed data. So that's what this StatFS piece is keeping. So again, I'm on that at the moment. Hopefully to publish this piece sooner than later. But one more issue that that might be in front of us is this applies to both new write-ahead log and to some degree to Gabby's allocation map recovery, and that's the issue which is caused by, let's say, circle dependencies between database, allocation maps, and some additional entries like new write-ahead log or recovery procedure. And it looks like, well, for instance, for recovery procedure, which is trying to build an allocation map, we might get the situation when database requires a repair, and hence the recovery procedure is unable to proceed before PlusStore FSCK is applied. But this FSCK procedure in repair mode, it might need some more data at BlueFS to be allocated. And to do that, we need allocation map, and hence the link is closed. The same applies to write-ahead log, which needs to replay transactions on startup. Hence, it needs database in read-write mode. But this happens before allocation map is retrieved, and hence BlueFS is unable to allocate space from main device. So a workaround for this issue is to use standalone volume again. So it tracks allocation maps independently of database, and hence we are able to allocate chunks from it at any time. But for shared device, it's not the case. And the only solution that I can see so far is to have a sort of reserved or recovery region at BlueFS for BlueFS at main device, which is used for these specific tasks, and no allocations happen to it in regular operation. Doesn't look very elegant, and we need some means to restore this region if it was in use and things like that. But so far, I just want to highlight that issue. Well, any questions so far?
Well, if, Igor, you do your separate write-ahead log, how much could it bring us closer to a solution of your circular loop if we could actually totally separate our metadata on allocations from, okay, again, my thinking is maybe if we had write-ahead log, your new one, maybe we could revert what we did with allocations, meaning we will not pay modification to RocksDB because we will have allocation file with allocations, and any updates that we did not do will reside in write-ahead log. Just piggybacking.
Not sure I understand how this would work. So, in my opinion, write-ahead log is absolutely orthogonal to allocation map. And actually, introducing this log makes this circle dependency issue more visible. So I definitely need to avoid these circle dependencies for new write ahead lock. And the only way I can do that right now is to use standalone standalone volume for the DB.
But if I understand correctly, we have the same circular dependency even with existing write ahead log.
Right, but for existing write ahead log, it's transparent. So with new write ahead log, we actually have 3 different entries: write ahead log, database, and allocation map, and hence the circle. With write ahead log embedded into RocksDB, it's not the case in my understanding. Well, it's the case for this allocation recovery stuff still, but let's say it's less visible. Okay, we can talk about this offline. There are probably some other issues with new write ahead log which makes this more important, but it's hard to explain during online in that short period of time.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Igor. In the interest of time, again, we've got almost 11 minutes. So you want to talk about the next topic that you
Well,
had?
just briefly, we talked about that before. We might need some improvements to BlueFS. The first, the major reason behind that is to improve the BlueFS robustness. And to do that, we might want to implement some redundant superblocks, for instance. Start using 4K allocation units, and maybe, well, not maybe, it's definitely it would be definitely required for 4K allocation unit. We'll need expandable superblocks, because small allocation unit sometimes result in lack of, so they might suffer from the lack of enough space at fixed 4K superblock. Yeah, and the last topic that I'd like to briefly discuss or share, it's unrelated to BlueStore, and we had the discussion before, but it's might be interesting for a bit different audience. It's an implementing of Scratch pools, which is actually another complete independent backend, like replicated and recorded ones. But the idea behind is to have absolutely transparent logic. I mean, no logic at all at this level, and hence gain performance at cost of data safety. So for some use cases, users might want to get performance, but do not care about data safety. So, and I did some POC on that, and indeed, the performance gain is pretty large, and the implementation is actually completely independent of the other OSD stuff. So why not to implement it?
Yeah, I think we discussed it at a performance call and we agree that it's a great idea. Maybe once your POC is ready, it'll be a useful thing to send it out to the mailing list and get more feedback. I'm curious to know what those use cases look like.
Yeah, I just wanted to share for a bit different audience.
Yes, yes, yes. I like it. All right. Any questions? Anything we want to discuss on that topic, or should we move ahead? All right, not hearing anything. So I will gloss over the next couple of topics. So these are features we wanted to get into Quincy, but have spilled over. There are outstanding PRs for both. The first one is about configuration profiles that can be used for several purposes on a pool level. And there is a PR linked in this, so I'm not going to go into further detail. The next one is about the automatic key rotation. There also is an outstanding PR that I think Radic has taken over from Sage, and we are pretty close to getting that done for Reef. With that, I am going to give it to Laura to talk about the balancer improvements that are in the pipeline.
Yes, so I'll go through this quickly. So for targeted for Reef, but it will be able to be backported into Quincy. Josh Salmon and I have been collaborating on a workload or primary balancer for so the current in Ceph's current balancer implementation. It's important to balance write and read requests across OSDs for optimal performance, and the current capacity balancer works well to or it handles write requests, but there's still a need to balance read requests based on pool workloads. So targeted for Reef, Josh Salomon and I have been working on implementing a workload balancer that will balance read requests on a pool by pool basis. And there was some work done for Quincy that made it possible for us to backport this. We worked on refactoring the existing capacity balancer code to make it more, to clean up the code essentially and make it easier for people to in the future and to make the code more understandable. And that refactoring PR is linked at the bottom of the Etherpad there. And to view a more detailed explanation of the high-level design of the workload balancer, I've also linked an open PR that will be included once the implementation has been merged. But it explains what the existing capacity balancer does and why there's a need for the workload balancer and how they would how they work in conjunction and how they sometimes contradict each other for use cases. And this work is also set to be talked about at Ceph.con, so you'll hear more about if you're planning on attending Ceph.con, you'll hear more about progress during that. And then another thing I want to mention is something we worked on, but will carry into Reef, is we want to improve balancer testing, and to do that, we need more accurate examples of what. So this happened or was brought up originally during the user dev monthly meeting, but we created a tracker issue. It's at the bottom, the third thing listed in the appendix there. And we opened this up to the Ceph community so that people could share their OSD maps with us. And this is, of course, voluntary. We would never ask for OSD maps, against people's will, but this is all volunteered by Ceph community members. And the goal here is to improve balancer testing moving forward and to account for more realistic scenarios. And we hope to continue collecting during the development of Reef. And that's pretty much all I had for that. And of course, it's a lot about the workload balancer especially, but I've hopefully the links I've included, if you have more questions or wanting to know more details, you can check those out. And that's all I had, but if there are any questions, feel free to ask or comment.
Cool. Thanks, Laura. And as you rightly pointed out, if you want to hear more about or stay tuned on the progress, this will be discussed at the Ceph talk. So I think with that, I'm going to move to the next topic, which is about the autoscaler. So this is a pretty open-ended topic, I would say. There's nothing in particular that we have planned or we want to do. But we are, so is Junior on the call?
Yes, yes, I am.
Yeah, so I guess Junior, maybe briefly want to talk about the checks and balances that were added in Quincy and some recent issues that that were brought to our notice, because of which we want to probably revisit what else we want to do for the autoscaler.
Sure. So in Quincy, we added, I think the big thing that we added is the -- bulk flag, which this essentially any pool that is a data pool that we anticipated will need a lot of PGs. The -- you would create the pool with the -- bulk flag, and that will essentially start the pool with the maximum amount of PGs that it can be given. And any pool that doesn't have like the -- bulk, it would just remain the same kind of behavior of the autoscaler, where it scales by like capacity. So if there's more capacity, it will scale more. The other feature, I think, is the no autoscale global flag, where you can turn off the autoscaler globally with just one command, rather than going into each pool and manually turning it off. And so and the issue we just face with this, there's a Ceph users. So that user basically upgraded from, I think, 14 something to like 16.27, which is I believe Pacific, and there were some rebalancing issue, which it takes like many days for, I think, PGs to decrease. And basically, I think the motivation behind this topic is basically should we make the autoscalers not like do things behind the user's back without like if the scaling of the PGs will like really impact like the performance of the cluster, or it takes too long for it to change the number of PGs. Should we like should the autoscaler not do that? And maybe I think we can just like tell the user that okay, the autoscaler wants to do this, but it would take too long. Yeah. So
yeah, I think the general questions that we have on our minds is around visibility into what the autoscaler is doing, and especially this one seems to be a weird case when the autoscaler tried to scale the pools down by 4 times or something. So why did that happen? And if what extra maybe logging or improvements we can add into the autoscaler to be able to easily catch these kind of cases. In general, we have a max misplaced object metric that the autoscaler uses to not create too many misplaced objects at a time. But given this particular case, it seemed like this is one case where the autoscaler was on in a large cluster. So even the number of misplaced based on the total number of objects did make sense initially, but there's still some unknowns that we are trying to figure out in this case. And in line with this, we want to, in general, see what else the autoscaler needs in order to perform well in all kinds of scale. Any more discussion on this? I know the autoscaler got a lot of feelings around it. But in any other concerns or anything else we want to discuss at this point? All right, if not, so there are two more topics. There's one about OSD map trimming on the OSD that was brought to my attention by Prashant yesterday. I do not have too much context on it, but it seems like there's a case that has come up where there are millions of OSD maps in the OSD that are not getting trimmed because of a trigger of OSD map generation that is required. So I believe I'm going to take this topic to a different forum for discussion after I have a good understanding of what's going on. And with that, we can go to the last one. There is some interest in EC partial stripe reads. Who added this and who wants to lead this?
Yeah, I added that one. It's been on the backlog for a while since we haven't really taken a look at it. I think it might be becoming more relevant again with more analytics workloads being run on top of RGW, things like RK and Arrow and other sorts of processing engines that end up doing smaller reads than the whole object. They're just looking at a subset of the data. And essentially the idea with the EC partial stripe reads is to be able to read just a small piece of the data without going to every single OSD and therefore saving the CPU overhead on say 9 of the 12 of 1/10 of the K plus M, putting the 1/10 the cost basically for a K plus M erasure code. So basically, this is a the read case here is relatively simple compared to the write case, and I think it seems like it would provide significant benefit for CPU load for these kinds of cases. Another application would be potentially a log structured format for RBD, which could be stored in erasure coded pools much more efficiently, but where reads, especially small reads, would be expensive with the current striping strategy.
Josh, at one point I think we had talked about like for sufficiently small reads switching to replication. Did we end up ever discounting that, or was it just it just disappeared?
Well, this would be small reads for large objects, so the objects would still be large.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that this was there in the backlog, but kept getting pushed. I also think this is a broader topic, Josh. Maybe we should also pick this up in a CDM where we can
that sounds
talk
good.
more about it. Okay. With that, I think we've got a couple more broader things to discuss in terms of testing improvements and code cleanup and deprecation. I know we are out over time, but maybe next 5 minutes we can quickly touch upon these. So I guess the goal here is to talk about testing coverage improvement for things like stretch mode that got implemented a couple of years ago, but we are starting to find bugs when our downstream folks are testing it. So it seems like we need more coverage across stretch mode testing in tautology. Other than we have some facets which change the election mode, and I also believe there's a net split subsuite, but I guess this tracker kind of describes what the essential goals are.
Yeah, I don't think the net split has actually run anywhere. I started on it and it sort of was like, okay, here's the tasks, but actually integrating with anything useful is not done. And everyone's confused. Like, I implemented stretch mode and there was no pretense that the tautology testing was adequate. This goes back some of the, well, maybe it doesn't. There was a discussion earlier that was making me think of this. So there's the election mode testing is pretty good because we can just switch it for the monitors and run it everywhere. And because I wrote a new wrote a bunch of new monitor election logic that was easy for me to architect so that I could write unit tests for it. But setting up NetSplit is a pain, and at the time that I was working on it, then we just couldn't really count on, and I know this is fixed now, we just couldn't really count on tests that took more than 2 nodes really ever running. And, you know, we just mostly can't unit test the peering state, which is in OSDs, which is a bummer. But basically someone with, you know, more time for development than me needs to sit down and write tests for this. I'm giving a Ceph talk that's basically like, here's what's written, here's what's not written, and by the way, please write tests because we need them. So
that's a good start. So how about I mean, like, at least one of the problems that you said of, like, you know, more than a test with more than 2 nodes, we don't have any kind of constraints at this point with the new dispatcher stuff in Tautology. So I think the best starting point would be to look at what the NetSplit suite is doing, and maybe you can talk about that in your talk, and start running it and add more coverage there.
Yeah,
and somebody
so, I mean,
else from the team can pick it up.
Base tools, and then since it's now possible to run things with 3 or 5 nodes or whatever, then we could use that to start doing sort of the split testing. But all those things need to be written. But yeah, yes, this needs to happen. If there's someone who wants to volunteer, that would be great. I think Junior has sent me a couple questions about pieces of it that I've been slow to get back to him on, but I will try and help anyone as much as I can if they want to work on this.
There you go. I think we found the mentor and the mentee for this.
Only if you buy me a beer at Ceph.con.
So yeah.
Kidding.
So, Junior, you know which talk you're attending at Ceph.con for sure.
Okay. Yep.
All right. I think we at least have a path forward for this. The next one, and maybe the next few topics, are not just RADOS specific. I think the whole Ceph project can benefit from these. The first one here is about logical scale testing. So we discussed this in a CDM, and one of the the basic building blocks we needed was this Blue Store zero block detection, a piece that Laura already worked on, and we have already merged this PR. So with this in place, I think the idea is to be able to design tests in tautology with, like, not just like 3 or 5 nodes, but much more number of nodes and many more number of OSDs. And the starting point would be to just, run these same tests that we have on a larger scale and see, what it takes. And I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of bottlenecks and things will fail. But given that we have all the basic stuff in, it's again something we need to start exploring. I mean, yeah, this is not much discussion to be done, but work to be done. Any other thoughts anybody else has on this? And why I said this is crucial, not just for RADOS. I mean, any other component can start doing larger scale testing. Given that this piece has already merged, so we are not literally filling up the devices in the Smithy machines, etc. So we can afford to run tests with larger number of OSDs, even for a longer amount of time, if we want to. Anything else on this topic?
I guess part of this could benefit the Github testing as well, since it involves looking at how we can scale down the resources required for not actually storing any data, and that could let us do even larger scale Github testing too.
Yep, that's a good point, and it kind of ties with the config profile thing. We discussed that we could have a config profile that would be like low resource usage config profile that we could set, and the test would just tune the cluster based on that.
I think we are already in discussion with some of the QE members, right? Yeah, for the automating some of it. So I think it will help. I think the same automation can be used.
Yep. In terms of the actual work, I think if our QE folks can help with this, it'll be great.
Yeah.
All right. With that, the next topic is everybody's favorite topic, And one of our pain points, upgrades. I think it's high time we need to improve our upgrade test coverage. And we had some discussion around how we, how do we ensure that all the PRs that are getting backported and even like new PRs that are coming in are going through adequate upgrade tests or upgrade test runs. I feel this is going to be an ongoing discussion, but some of the basic ideas that came in were like, if there are, let us say, encoding changes, or there are pieces of code that are prone to backward compatibility breakages, we could have things like Github Hooks, which would raise some sort of indication in the PR to A, increase the awareness of the reviewer, B, kind of make the upgrade test run a requirement, and not just leave it to the person who's testing it to identify whether an upgrade test is needed or not. So I guess there are a few ideas we need to start implementing some of this GitHub Hooks thing, or even like bring it to our day-to-day when we are reviewing PRs, things that need upgrade testing. How do we ensure that they don't get merged without that? And the other thing was like we are also doing baseline tests for like almost all suites for the master branch every week. So upgrades is going to be something that we are going to do, test with that. Any more thoughts on this? If not, I am just going to leave the last. I mean, this is just a general topic that we have like things like Trello tracker in which we track features, but we don't have anything wherein we can actually track test improvements. And one of the use cases was that we had a contributor who had a valid patch, but we wanted them to write a test, and they, because of their lack of familiarity or whatever it is, weren't able to contribute that particular test. So for such cases, and even for like other things that we keep talking about, like, hey, it'll be nice to have such a test, there's nothing that we are doing to track those kind of things. And some of those could actually be beginner projects and low-hanging fruits for contributors. So it's a general question about what mechanism we want to use to track test improvements. We could do it in the form of like a separate category in our Redmine component. Like we already have bugs, features. We could have something like tests that we're looking at a regular cadence, or we could do Trello. But I believe this is also another topic where we want to get more developer feedback on. Any other thoughts or strong opinions on this? Or do we all agree it's a good idea?
I just wrote a comment. I like the idea of using Redmine for that, because that's a lot of users are familiar with. And it's a good idea in overall, I think.
Yeah, I think Radek and I were talking about this, and we were like, okay, it just makes it's the obvious place would be a Redmine. Adding a new category there shouldn't be a big task, but if we think that's a good idea, we can just go ahead and get that done. And yeah, I think the next one is, it's again something that the RADOS team has seen. So currently the entire time to complete a RADOS suite run is like 5 hours, I would say, not less than that, of course. What can we do to reduce that? So I think this is, again, a common topic we will be discussing in different forums, but just wanted to raise awareness on it. Finally, I think the last topic is around code cleanup and deprecation, and probably Radek, your favorite section here. You want to lead this one?
Sure. Well, actually, one of the ways to reduce the runtime of our tests is to deprecate components. For instance, I think we're still testing pretty extensively file store. We could, if we deprecate it, if we finally remove it, we could actually get back some of our resources and we can spend it or either spend it on more, let's say, Bluestar testing, or just squeeze the time of the resources spent for single run. So it's also beneficial. However, I haven't added file store. Anyway, I would really vote for it.
Yeah, so I think we have already sent out a deprecation warning in Quincy for file store. So I would say most of our test cases can now afford to not run with file store. Maybe there are things like upgrade tests and stuff which still should use file store. But I think in general, we can get rid of it.
Wonderful.
Cool, that was easy.
Yep, it's not a no-brainer. Another point is about memdb. It's an old standing PR, and the question is whether do we really have an active user of it? Because if not, we could not only kill one of the KV backends, but we also could eradicate some complexity from buffer list. Actually, there is buffer list. Buffer row has the interface for cloning, which means a bunch of code and even putting some extra data into each of our buffers, just for the sake of cloning, for the cloning responsibility, which is being used solely inside memdb. So I believe there are a few rabbits to shot the same bullet here. The question is, do we really have an active user of it? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
So what prevented us from merging it last time this got reviewed? Was there?
Being unsure. I think we should. I think we should at least make an announcement to the mailing list. Ask all developers, even outside, whether it's still useful for them or not. I would expect silence, to be honest. But we need
you're referencing memdb. Is that something for the memory store that we have? Probably. I mean, there
no,
won't be any external users or something that's in memory.
No, I think it's for testing the KV interface solely. It's not used by memstore.
Oh, okay.
It looks
I
basically
should be able to track that down because there's no way something like that is exposed to any external users. It's just about what we're doing in the project. I sure hope.
Kivu has suggested that there might be some users, let's say in Intel, but I don't know.
Okay, I think it doesn't hurt to ask in the user thread. If there are existing users, they'll probably chime in then.
Yep. Well, another question is whether do we need to go through the full-blown deprecation and removal process, or maybe we could just remove it immediately in Reef.
Like we said, I think it's a dev feature, not a user feature. So I think it's really a removal question, not a deprecation question.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. Okay, I think we have this point addressed. So moving to another one, the next one. Ceph OSD Watch Op Legacy Watch. Very old one. However, there is one clutch here, KRBD. And actually, kernels in the kernel version around 4.6, if I recall correctly. There is a last comment from Ilya Droimov, who made us aware that this legacy app is still being used by on very old kernels. Okay, everything below 4.7 from July 2016. 6 years counting from now 6 years after the release. I think it would be rather safe to finally kill it. Still, I'm not entirely sure, and I would need I would really appreciate feedback on that matter. The potential benefit from eradication is that actually the watch notify machinery, it got into now it got in the classical OSD. It got two variants, two tastes, two flavors. One is assuming that we can reliably discover a connection reset, which is the legacy one. Well, it turned wrong. The assumption turned wrong, and later we implemented full-blown ping-pong machinery on our own, just to detect detect connection issues. And this one, the new flavor, only the new flavor, got implemented in Crimson. Unfortunately, the old one will be far complex and painful to bring, especially in the multi-reactor stage of Crimson, because it requires basically some interaction with MS handle reset of a messenger. It has, in other words, it makes our session. It makes necessary of our sessions to be aware about watch con state. If we can remove that, it will for sure decrease the complexity pretty significantly of the watch notify stuff. Still, is it safe to forget about kernels from let's say 2016?
Well, so those are two different questions, I think. I can't imagine there's any reasonable argument for needing to implement the old version in Crimson. For removing it, though, what we need to do is look at what distros are shipping which kernels and what LTS releases, probably, and then make a call. Because if, there's a still active Ubuntu LTS that doesn't support the new watch notify, we probably don't want to kill it until that's done. Agreed.
But actually, yes, there are two cases. We don't. First one is implementing Crimson. We don't need to. Of course, we don't need to do that, except somebody would mandate us to support very old kernels, or right or not. The second one is whether is about removal. So, yeah, I think you're also right. We need to start from taking a look on the kernel version distro mapping.
Cool. Anything else on that topic?
Another question: full deprecation or just removal? Assuming we don't need to worry about the distro LGSs.
I don't know. Let's at least see if there are any distros that are still supporting it. Then you probably cannot even send a deprecation message, right? It's a dependency.
Yes, but there won't be after solving it. It won't be CDS to ask about.
It'll be TBD. We can discuss in a different forum.
Okay. No
Once
worries.
we have the answer.
Okay. Yep. No need to burn more time on that. The last thing is inside MGR module. I don't know who added that.
Yeah, I added it. I just wanted to understand, like, does anybody know if there are any users of this module? I know it got added a few years ago, but I don't think anybody's maintaining it.
I wouldn't expect any. I think it's, again, something we could ask the user list about, just to be sure.
All right. I agree. And that is pretty much everything that's on the agenda. 27 minutes over time, but I guess, is there anything else which is not in the agenda and you want to talk about? If not, thank you for joining the RADOS TDS session for Reef, and thank you for staying overtime as well. Have a good rest of your day. See you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone, guys. Bye.
Thanks. See you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.